So this is Lake Hollywood, and this is probably one of the two biggest episodes that has happened in quite a while. Not only for a big twist of events that has happened in the episode, I mean, quite clearly last week's episode was a big one in turn of events and everything. Having to learn where the art dealer gone and we have to figure out how to get her back or whatever. But also to the fact of what happened in this week's episode, that we gotta figure out how do we get even with the people in that regards. But let's find out what happens in this week's episode. So we see that the art dealer's home/museum is getting cleaned out, and Ray's friends drives off with the van. And he winds up making a deal with them, saying that if he can get his friend back, he'll show them a celebrity of their choice. And as they return home, and as Ray and the gang return home, that being his private investigator and Daryl, he goes up to Bridges' room and tells her to stay at home because of the situation that has just recently happened last week. But just to be on the safe side, just to stay there. Then we see that Terry, we then see that Terry is in a bit of distress with Marisol because, well, they're in a bit of a distraught with their calls and all of their situations that has recently happened to them in the past few weeks or so that has happened to them. We then see that Abs is seeing a guy that is watching them outside of their home, and Abs has to shut down the gym, but Terry refuses to do so. And because of the fact that all of his guys can basically guard the place with no problem whatsoever. Be lucky they don't quote blazing saddles while they're there. We then see that Ray catches up with Bunchy as they wind up seeing that they wind up having the sack full of money from their situation from Prim. And Ray winds up scolding Mick for the situation last week. And of course, being the situation that had happened, they sort of kind of understand. And he sort of kind of says that Mick will go out to the house and, guard them with his life, or whatever. You then see that Child Protective Services shows up to fight with Hector about how their youngest daughter will be able to hang out with him during the fights or whatever. But unfortunately, it looks like Hector's not going to be able to hang out with his little daughter, which sad to be him in that situation. So the private investigator gives the valuables. So the PI gives valuable information to Ray and heads up to the Russian's home for some information. And in their deal, for Ivy, the guy running the place wants to meet Butch Kramer, one of Ray's celebrities. Because one of the films that he's watching has that well-known celebrity in it. At least at the time. We then see that Hector's going to Marisol's place just to talk about just what's going on and just how it's affecting him and his life in general. But that's not really important right now, is it? So, Mick blames himself for everything that is just going on, but Abs is just looking on the bright side of life. Just how he just met up with Ray and just all the cutesy-wootsy and fun stuff that has just happened with himself and just everything that went on so very well. And I do have to admit, some of the stories that Ab said about like how both Ray and them met and just some of the stories that they shared is actually kind of hilarious the more I think about it. And I will admit, I will like to see like some of these like animated or whatever, or maybe even be a side story, much like the Dexter comics or whatever. But even then, I haven't seen the Dexter comics. So later on, we see that Ray talks with Butch during an interview and gives him the time for him to arrive at the Russian's home in order to satisfy the guys. But that will be for another time that we will see that situation arrive. Terry decides to go after Hector because it's been over an hour. We then see that Marisol starts getting a little bit feisty with him, but that might have been because of the drugs, and Hector decides to kill her while over the tub. And now that Hector's feeling a bit murderous about his situation, Hector decides to lie about his situation, about the murder, and how Ray has to come over and deal with the situation. Hector stays in his home feeling regret of this oncoming situation. So the Russians decide to actually set up a fight for Butch, and of course they obviously kick his ass because, well, they obviously were setting up the fact that they liked him, when in return they actually didn't. And a lot of his movies were disrespectful for their country. That was a bit cruel if you ask me. The Russians, Ray returns to Marisol's place to get rid of her body, as Ray dumps her body into the lake and walks off from the car and acts like the situation never happened, setting up the situation as if it were suicide, and from there, Lake Hollywood has now ended. Lake Hollywood, I don't know what to say about this. This was a crazy episode. A jumbo one, if you will, with situations going here, situations going there, but I still can't believe they killed off Marisol. So, that's one for the books. They killed off Marisol. Oh, wow. So anywho, some of you may be wondering, will there be a new Ray Donovan episode next week? Well, actually, no. Because of something going on with Showtime, maybe one of the season finales coming up, Showtime has decided they're going to push episode 11 of season 4 by next week, or 2 weeks, if you will. So by then, you won't see a new Ray Donovan vlog until the new episode. Which, by that point, will be, that is, if I can pull it up on my phone here, the new Ray Donovan episode will be by... September 11th. I don't mean it as a bad thing. I mean, it's good to see an episode return on a day. And I can't wait for the day that Ray Donovan returns. But on the day of a national tragedy, it's kind of a bit of an issue, you know, if you know what I mean. And I'm not trying to be comedic about it. But, anywho, I mean, with this in mind, I will be working on the BronyCan vlogs during this spare time. So, I guess it is kind of a nice break for me to start working on the con vlogs during this break, if you will. So I guess until then, see you guys when the con... see you guys in 2 weeks for the next Ray Donovan vlogs, or just when the next set of videos come out. Okay? Okay. Later.